Hello and welcome to the Washington Urban Debate League's Novice Video Series. Today we'll be discussing how to debate on case as the negative. First, we'll go over the difference between on and off case debate. Then we'll talk about how to attack solvency and inherency of the affirmative case. We'll talk about how to respond to advantages and the affirmative offense. And lastly, we'll talk about how to debate on case beyond the first negative constructive. So, when I'm talking about on and off case, what am I talking about? Well, in a debate round, there are two classes of arguments, on and off case. On case arguments refer to arguments made in the first affirmative case, presented by the affirmative, and any direct responses by the negative. An off case argument refers to arguments about the plan that are not mentioned in the first affirmative constructive, but relevant to deciding if the plan is good or bad. These arguments are generally called disadvantages, counterplans, critiques, or topicality, and we'll get into those in greater depth later in this video series. Referring to your arguments as on or off case is a superficial distinction, but can make it easy for the judge to know where to write down the arguments you're making and to think about how they interact with one another. Let's get into being negative on case. The only responsibility of the negative is to prove that the affirmative plan is a bad idea. One of the best ways to do this is to explain how the affirmative itself won't work and is a bad idea. There are many ways to attack the affirmative case, which we're about to walk through. First, let's touch on debating inherency and solvency on case. As a review, inherency is the part of the affirmative where they state what the problem is and why it currently isn't fixed. Lazy affirmative debaters will not research their case thoroughly and won't keep it up to date. So if President Trump or Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos make substantial changes in education policy, it could make the affirmative case uninherent. Essentially, the affirmative case will have already happened, creating no reason to do it again. Smart debaters will find this evidence and show the affirmative to be unnecessary. To review, solvency describes how the plan works and ensures that the cause and effect of the plan action actually happens. Attacking solvency can be done either advantage by advantage or plan-wide. Going advantage by advantage is more specific and can result in a stronger argument, especially if you have specific evidence that the plan won't have a specific outcome. However, denying that the plan won't do anything is often easier to argue and quicker to say, even though it may not always be quite true. Here's an example. If the plan says that the United States should increase its investment in STEM subjects, you could just say that students take math and science already. We don't need it. Or you could go in depth and say that further investment in math and science courses in the United States will not result in greater student learning, just wasting money. Let's talk about debating the advantages, the affirmative offense on case. Advantages, as we know, are reasons why you should do the affirmative plan. These are either expressed as benefits of the plan's action or problems that the plan's action can avoid. Advantages have three areas: uniqueness, links, and impacts. These are the building blocks of each argument, and we'll break them down as we go through this video. On the uniqueness debate, challenging uniqueness of an advantage denies that the link will do anything, that there will not be a cause and effect, and questions the reasons for action. There are two general ways to challenge uniqueness. First, denying that the problem exists. If there isn't a problem, there's no need to fix it. And secondly, suggesting that the problem is inevitable. If the plan action does not fix the problem, then there's no way you can claim fixing it as an advantage. Here are some examples. First, the plan. Increase STEM investment in the United States. The uniqueness? Well, they'll say that STEM investment is not sufficient. But a non-unique would say that STEM investment is increasing now, so there's no need to do the plan. Or you can make an inevitability argument. STEM investment will rise from federal, state, and private investors no matter what, making the plan also irrelevant. The plan could be that to increase funding for Title I schools to solve the achievement gap. The uniqueness, they'll argue, is that the achievement gap is getting worse now. The non-unique argument will be the opposite, that the achievement gap is decreasing now, meaning there's no need for action. An inevitability argument could be that the achievement gap is inevitable in a world of racial and economic inequality. Let's talk about the link debate. This is denying the cause and effect of the plan. This can be a strong strategy. Making a no-link argument is a defensive argument and can often be helpful to deny the affirmative access to their impacts. Turning a link is even better. Turning an argument is when you can explain a cause and effect relationship actually goes the other way than the other team explained. This is an offensive argument that can capture an advantage for the negative and turn it into a disadvantage. Let's go through some examples. If the plan is to increase STEM investment in the United States to expand the economy, and the link is that STEM investment causes economic growth, a no-link, a defensive argument, would be that STEM investment does not cause economic growth, simply denying the affirmative's claim. A link turn could say that STEM investment is a waste of money, which will reduce economic growth. Actively the opposite of the plan's cause and effect scenario. Let's look at a second example. If the plan is to increase funding for Title I schools to solve the achievement gap, and the link is that increased funding for Title I schools will reduce the achievement gap. A no-link argument would simply to be say, increasing funding will not reduce the achievement gap, denying the initial claim. A link turn could be that increasing funding for Title I schools makes the achievement gap worse. Let's talk about the impact debate. Impacts are usually big and scary. The point of an impact is to be as impressive as possible to motivate the judge to act. This balances magnitude, time frame, and likelihood or probability. Many debates come down to impact calculus, a comparison of impacts from the advantages and disadvantages of a plan based on the above-mentioned factors of magnitude, time frame, and likelihood or probability. If you can deny or capture an opponent their impacts, it can give you a large advantage. Impact defense simply denies that a link will have a stated outcome, or reduces the likelihood, magnitude, or probability of an impact. An impact turn argues that the outcomes are the opposite of what the other team implies. This is offense for your team. Let's walk through two examples. If the plan says that increasing STEM investment in the United States can increase the economy, and their impact is that economic growth reduces poverty, a no-impact argument denies that claim. Economic growth does not impact poverty whatsoever. An impact turn could be that economic growth could only go to the top 1%, increasing economic inequality and poverty. Let's look at another example. The plan could be to increase Title I funding for schools to solve the achievement gap. And the impact is that the achievement gap is racist and causes poverty. A no-impact argument could be that the achievement gap is not racist and does not cause poverty. The impact turn would be that the achievement gap is good and that poverty and racism are necessary evils for societal progress. Notice that not all arguments are necessarily as good or persuasive. So don't just reflexively turn an opponent's arguments against themselves. Let's talk about debating on case past the first negative constructive now that we've gone over the basics. In the block, the 2NC and the 1NR, you should discuss different arguments, so remember to divide and conquer. Case arguments in the first negative constructive can be a diversion from your off-case arguments, and you can just ignore them later. An independent reason why you should vote negative and should be taken by one or the other speakers in the block, or an attempt to pressure the first affirmative rebuttal and cause them to undercover certain arguments. In this case, they should be in the first negative rebuttal to give the affirmative the least amount of prep time possible. On-case debate should always include some offense against the first affirmative constructive. Like any other argument, you should tell the story of your case, respond to any 2AC responses, and expand upon the point, explaining how it's a reason for the affirmative to lose the debate, adding evidence if necessary. In the second negative rebuttal, the 2N should choose a single strategy they think they are going to win and expend their entire speech explaining the nuances and details of that position and why it wins them the debate. On-case arguments can be an independent strategy for victory, especially if you have offensive arguments to go for. It can also be a strategy to distract or stretch the first affirmative rebuttal too thin that you can just kick out of and stop talking about in the 2NR, or part of a on and off case strategy that works together. Either way, prioritize only what you need to be victorious and focus on offensive arguments.